Good morning and welcome to the March 13th, 2023 podcast from Record Eraser, also known as PA Pardon Services. Today's going to be a little bit different of a format. I'm actually going to be interviewed by Sam Shoemaker of Bold Oaks Media, and he's going to help me answer some questions about my career and why I do what I do. And then we'll move into an update from the Board of Pardons or about the Board of Pardons, as well as maybe some stories. So, Sam, why don't you tell everybody a little about yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Mark. This is going to be fun. My name is Sam Shoemaker. I'm co-owner of Bold Oaks Media. We help Mark here every month produce some content that we share out to his different platforms. And just felt like it would be a good opportunity to have people hear about you, Mark. You're obviously in a very personal service. You get to know people, and you get to know things that, they wouldn't even want other people to know. And
That's true.
Obviously they need to trust you. And I think you're a trustworthy guy, and I want other people to know that. So.
Well, and we'll get through this, but as a man of a certain age, raised by a dad of a certain age, we were not really taught to be comfortable about talking about ourselves in public. And so I will share these details, and that'll be that.
So it really is going to be an interrogation. That's what it's going to feel for you. All right.
Well, don't forget, I've sat through dozens or hundreds of police interviews with people that committed felonies and murders and such not, even if I was watching on a screen. So I'm not going to treat it like an interrogation, or I might act differently.
Fair enough. All right. Well, so let's get into it. I know that you've prepared a little bit of what you want to say about your story here, but so just give us your background. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? Those things.
All right. So it all began in the beginning. I was born and raised in Elizabethtown, Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Went to Elizabethtown Area High School, graduated, and like so many local people, went to Penn State University, where it took me a few years to graduate. After I graduated, I moved to Boston, where I did not have steady, regular, frequent employment, but I did everything from factory jobs. I was an electrode mechanical assembler for a biomedical firm. I used to make and sell 8x10 glossy prints when they used to print photos from slides, and Kodachrome and Ektachrome, and became the manager of a camera repair shop. And those were my 4 years in Boston. After that, I moved to Concord, New Hampshire to begin to study law. The primary reason for that was that it wasn't that expensive at the time. And after 4 years in Boston, I learned that if you're not local, Irish, Catholic, and if your name doesn't end with the right last name, I just felt like I needed more credibility. And as a philosophy major, I wasn't getting a lot of job offers either. So I decided to go to law school and get the little Juris Doctor appellation after my name to show that I had a degree, and then see what happens next.
That's great. I didn't even know some of that story.
Well, one of the stories you don't know, although you're my video producer or whatever it is.
Go with that. That's fine.
Okay. So back in the days of VHS tapes, I worked myself through law school, working in a VHS tape store where people would come in and rent tapes. But then also somehow the National Academy of Sciences provided the owner of a store with a VHS tape editing machine, and they paid me to actually create, I guess you would call it a sizzle reel or a productional video for the National Academy of Science. Must have been the little local New Hampshire division of that. And so I learned how to put edit points and cut and mix and review and create a master videotape and things of that sort. Equipment has changed dramatically since then, of course.
That's great. So you listed out, a couple of your interests. I the first time I met you, I knew you were even just working at a camera shop just because you loved photography. You were just doing that as something that you to fill your free time. So I know that you are a photographer. You are a gearhead like the rest of us who do photography and videography. What are some of your other interests that you have, and are there any that tie to what you're doing today with pardon and expungements?
Well, so I hear your question, but I'm going to answer it because as you were talking, I realized, Jeff is here today, a professional photographer. And when I was managing the photo store on Lincoln Street in Boston, all kinds of wedding photographers would just be in and out with their Nikon F1s, F3s, Canons, A1s, all these professional pieces of equipment came in, and I had about 6 techs working there repairing all of these things. And there was a time when my eyesight was good and I had access to some jeweler's tools when I would actually take one of those big shutters that they used to use on the big box cameras and just disassemble it and then put it back together because I sort of wanted to be a camera tech. But I don't do that these days. I was wondering if I might find one somewhere. But anyway, other hobbies and passions. Well, I play guitar from time to time, and I am a short-range road runner. Like I intend to participate in some of Lancaster County's little 5K, 3-mile runs, maybe some 5-milers and things of that sort, but nothing that ties directly into pardons and expungements.
I'm gonna challenge that just a little bit. And I know this is a weird thing to say, you're gonna be challenged on your bio, but I know you're not comfortable speaking about yourself, but let me interpret something that I'm hearing. Like, you have a lot of interests. The conversations that we have been eclectic. And I think what that does really well is that makes you relatable to a lot of different situations, a lot of different people. And in your business, that's really important. And am I out of line of saying that? You generally have interests in a wide variety of things.
Well, so thank you, I think. And maybe eclectic is in the mind of the beholder. We've talked about a wide variety of subjects. And in fact, I love to read, and I read a wide variety of topics. And I was working at Perfect Image Camera on Fruitville Pike most recently because of being comfortable with cameras and such not. And in fact, I got a very nice camera, but for the life of me, I don't take it out and do a lot of photography. So I have some wide-ranging knowledge and interests, but in terms of what I actually do, most of it is just sticking to that website and the people that need these records cleared.
Pardons and expungements.
That's my hobby, my vocation, and my career right now.
Yeah. But you generally like people too. I think that's important.
Well, I do like people, and one of the things I don't like is the fact that maybe. So I went into philosophy because I've always seemed to have an inherent sense of fairness. Like life should be fair.
Yes.
My mom and dad drilled that into me. You're just supposed to be fair. You're not supposed to lie. You're not supposed to tell a mistruth. Life's supposed to be fair. And in fact, growing up, you were always told if you made a mistake, say you're sorry and move on. The days of the scarlet letter when criminals used to be branded were supposed to be long gone 200 years ago. But life is supposed to be fair. And after I went into criminal law, whether I was prosecuting or defending, it just became clear that you give out these convictions to ordinary people, which might be fair because they broke the law and so they're supposed to pay the price then, but the conviction never goes away. The burden never goes away. After you've paid your price and you're off probation, you continue to be judged and oppressed and held down for decades because of something that happened when you were probably, as most of my clients and prospects tell me, I was young and stupid. I fell in with the wrong people. This happened. Now it's been holding me back for years, and it's just not fair. It's not right. It's not what was supposed to happen.
So my next question is, why did you become an attorney? But what you just said, I feel like partially answers that. Were those things kind of going through your mind as you made that transition from Boston to Massachusetts, or I'm sorry, New Hampshire?
No, because it was actually when I was being an electrode mechanical assembler at an electronic blood sensing factory company. And they employed a lot of immigrants. And I became aware of the fact that a lot of the immigrants, we had to make little plastic electrodes out of a variety of Teflon tubes and glue and epoxy and such not. And I was pretty good at it because I like repetitive tasks. But it became clear to me that some of the people that worked there creating these electrodes were as good or better than me. And they weren't being paid as much. And everybody was supposed to have a 90-day review and then a 6-month review. I got my review and I got a raise, but then the Laotians and the Vietnamese and there's a lady from Creole, they weren't getting the same raises. And so, I actually walked into the manager's office and he looked up and he says, "What's up?" And I said, I've been here a year and I'm getting raises and I noticed that some of my coworkers aren't getting their reviews. And he's like, "Well, what concern is that of yours?" And I said, "Well, I'm working with them every day and I'm talking to them and it's just not fair." And he had a few choice words for me. And it was when I decided to go to law school shortly after that, that I thought I wanted to learn immigration law and help people immigrating. But when you are in law school and when you are studying a variety of different areas of law during a pretty intense academic time period, it became clear to me that the overwhelming details sort of were competing with my necessity to focus, drill in, and get good at something. So I'm not interested. I also thought I wanted to help with environmental law and regulations and things of that sort. But when you read the code, every word of it in multiple volumes, and then when you go to court, frequently your arguments are about subsections. It wasn't real. I mean, one of the things you don't know is that I worked my way through college in a lube bay and pumping gas at gas stations that used to be full service. We were called pump jockeys. And this started back in the days when somebody pulled in and we'd ask them how much gas they want. And then while the gas was pumping, we would actually clean their windshield, lift the hood, check their oil, and possibly brake fluid, maybe even check the tension on the belts. And so that was what I was used to, was working on cars. And then that was in college. And then when I went to law school, I actually spent the summers working with a carpenter, helping to build houses and framing and putting up roofs and tar paper and all that stuff. And so as I was learning law, like, it had to be real. It had to be real. I'm not interested in sitting somewhere. And so I naturally became sort of attached to criminal law because, again, I was a philosophy major. Here's criminal law. Here are people, just people, different sizes, different shapes, but they're people. They all have the same rights. They commit a crime. The police come, who are supposed to be fair, and sometimes they are, and they charge you with a crime. And then you go to court and you get a sentence. And you also have the individual's constitutional rights to remain silent, to be presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And you have the fact that the police are not supposed to cheat to gather evidence, and that if they do cheat, you're allowed to exclude that evidence. And there's the rules of criminal procedure, and there's the Crimes Code of Pennsylvania, and it's all very interesting because it's concise, you can understand it, you can get good at it. I like meeting people. I don't mind if I go to the prison or what used to be called Barnes Hall to meet juvenile offenders on the weekends. You just meet people, tell them about the law, and slowly become aware of the fact that the constitutional regulatory part of criminal law is really new and different to somebody that might be struggling with a personal situation, is incarcerated, and you're trying to get them to understand what the system wants to do with them.
Right. That's great. And I think if we can take a look a little bit at that time in between where you're doing that, where you're going and meeting people, where you are in court, to the time where you're now focusing on a very specific part of that system. And if I can set it up, a part of the system which you've expressed that you feel is underserved in a certain way, because it's kind of like that. Well, we have the criminal system, we have this system, but once they go through that system, there's all these unrealized consequences of living with a criminal record. So can you dive into that in-between stage where you're working as a criminal lawyer or a trial lawyer, and you're coming to the place where, hey, I just want to focus solely on this? What did that whole transition period look like?
Well, first of all, the trial lawyer part of it lasted 30 years.
Yeah.
So the thing is, 7 years as a public defender. 3 years as a public defender, 7 years as an assistant district attorney in Lancaster County. Of course, the assistant district attorneys and other people want to focus on, the trials they had, the real courtroom litigation, the serious cases they had. And those tend to be sort of the highlights. But in fact, what every public defender and every assistant district attorney does is there's a rotation. And every week you look at your rotation. And during some weeks, you're going to court from 8:30. If you're early, you have to be early. You have to get your cases lined up from 8:30 to 11:30 in the morning, and from 1 o'clock until 4:30 in the afternoon. So 6-7 hours of standing there. Now, the district attorneys present the case. There could be 10 to 15 guilty pleas being presented. You introduce every one of them. You talk to the judge. You tell him what the plea agreement was. You hand the judge the paperwork. The judge interviews the defense attorney and the defendant. Is this what we're doing? Do you understand your rights? Do you understand that you're pleading guilty? Interviews the defendant, and then the defendant acknowledges that he knows all of his rights, which is called, so the form to make sure you understand your rights is in itself confusing. It's called a guilty plea colloquy. So why you use words that nobody ever heard before to explain how much you understand your rights, I don't know. But the defendants, of course, stand there and they're like, yeah, sure I do, Judge. Sure. Give me my sentence. And then you get the sentence. Each one of these little presentations takes 5 to 30 or 40 minutes in a complicated case. And so hours and hours of time of every attorney in court isn't litigating at the top of your form with direct examination and cross-examination of witnesses. It is standing in court, listening with mind-numbing repetition to this recitation of colloquy rights, constitutional rights, the judges explaining, the defendants responding, and all the attorneys standing there and slowly getting older. And so then, whether it's defending or whether it was prosecuting or back to defending, one of my tricks was, because my parents taught me the early bird gets the worm, and I would always have my case and my paperwork ready, try to get to court early and first. And if you could go at the beginning of the list, you could be the first one called at 9 o'clock. You could be out by 9:15. You can be on with the rest of your day. But if it either doesn't work like that, or if the list takes a swerve, you're in court until 11:30 with the last case. You don't get out until noon, and you just lost 2.5, 3.5 hours of your life. Day after day, after morning, after afternoon, week after year after year. This is the cookie cutter approach to criminal justice everywhere. And so anyway, fairness. So after doing this for about 30 years and realizing I didn't want to go to court anymore, and also just moving into from about 2010 on. No, 2008, I first had the idea to help people clear their records, and I started filing pardons. And so then I'm still doing active criminal defense, but I'm also filing more expungements and pardons. And so from 2008 to 2015 to 2020, I'm just getting dozens of stories every month about the actual consequences of these guilty pleas that I watched being given out, that I helped to get given out, either as the prosecutor or the defense attorney, for decades. And here, one by one, is each of these people coming and saying, this is how it's damaged my life. I haven't been able to get a job. I was supposed to be a good kid. I was supposed to be on this earning level, more and more and more. But after my conviction, I wasn't able to get a job. I wasn't able to earn. I wasn't able to learn. I wasn't able to go to school.
Yeah.
I can't get housing.
Right.
And so that just kept, it's not fair. It's simply not fair. It's not what the guys sign up for when they're taking the plea. It's not what people wanted when they started the criminal justice system. And part of it has been the advent of the internet and the easy accessibility of all records, and some of it is also just people's inherent nature to say, if I'm comparing two job applicants and this person doesn't have a record and you do, I'm going to go with the guy with no record.
Right.
It's just a world of unfairness out there, because what we wanted to do was rehabilitate people and get them on the right track, but they actually become disempowered because you're supposed to pay fines and costs. You have a parole officer. You're never given a copy of what you were convicted of. You're never told when it can be cleared or if it can be cleared. And then you're told to go get a job to make a lot of money to pay fines and costs, or else you're going to get a bench warrant because you failed to make payments. And you come back to court, and every time you do that, you have to pay an attorney. It's out of control. It's crazy. It's crazy, and nobody intended it. One of the phrases that we hear repeatedly is collateral consequences. The collateral consequence. Another phrase that doesn't make any sense, collateral consequences. What does that mean? That means when you go to court and plead guilty for a DUI and you think you know what your sentence is going to be, a month later you're going to get a letter from PennDOT telling you how long your license is suspended, and you never knew it, and it's too late to change it because PennDOT suspensions are considered a collateral consequence of a criminal plea. Well, how can I know what I'm doing if I'm pleading guilty? How am I making a knowing, intelligent, and voluntary decision to plead guilty if I don't know PennDOT's going to hammer me and nobody's talking about it?
Right.
Well, you should have thought about that. What does that mean? That's the system's response. Well, it's too late to open your guilty plea. Well, maybe PennDOT. No, PennDOT's not going to do anything. PennDOT's going to take this conviction and assign this suspension. So what was the question?
It doesn't matter. That was great. I mean, that's, I think that's my goal of wanting to interview you was kind of connect. Why do you care about what you do? And I think you did that from the very beginning when you were talking about how, the way you were raised, there was this, recognition almost that, well, it doesn't matter if the system's fair, we should be fighting for fairness for people on people's behalf. The world should be somewhat fair, and it's not. And it's like in your DNA now. It's in how you were raised and how you view the world that you want to help people achieve that, help people achieve what they should be able to do.
Get them back on track.
Get them back on track.
Get them back on track, because the system will not. I think humans create systems that we're incapable of controlling. Mm-hmm. And that is just the way it is, because we're complicated. And as soon as you try to regulate something like social justice, accidentally what you end up doing is regulating social injustice. Anyway, I know the systemic system's way of looking at things. I know the criminal justice system. So then it occurred to me, I formed Record Eraser in 2013, Pardon and Expungement Services, because there's only two things that can clear a record, a pardon and an expungement. They both have different rules. They both apply to different kinds of cases. But I thought if the system gives out all of these convictions and doesn't tell people what can be cleared and when, why don't I research their record? Because Pennsylvania has a wonderful opens record website that's called the UJS portal. And if I can research their records for free and look at the record, I can tell what can be cleared and when with an expungement or a pardon.
Mark, thank you for just doing this. I know it was my idea, and we had to kind of plan how we were going to have this conversation. But I've had a great time hearing more about your story, connecting, how you got from, being in the courtroom as a trial lawyer to where you are today, focusing on pardons and expungements. And you continue to be one of the most interesting people that I get to talk to and work with. And I hope that's what people can get from this, that you're not, a stiff collar lawyer, that you are somebody who genuinely cares about people. You can connect with people in a lot of different levels. And you genuinely want to see them improve their situation. And I hope that's what people hear.
Thank you, Sam. It's not easy to get me to talk about myself. Nobody really wants to hear a lawyer go on and on about himself. And in fact, there were decades when we just wouldn't even advertise. That has changed, but what I want to do is promote all content I can about pardons and expungements to help remove every one of these countless convictions that's out there, giving people unfair handicaps as they try to move forward with their life. So you can rest assured that I will do what I say and I'll say what I do. And thank you for helping make that happen.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome. All right, I'm going to cover an update about the Board of Pardons here, March 13th, 2023. The first thing is a scam alert was put up on the Board of Pardons website that I want everybody to be aware of. And so I want to tell you what that scam alert is about. Acting Attorney General Michelle Henry warns Pennsylvanians to be aware of a government imposter scam representing the PA Board of Pardons. Did you receive a phone call from a law enforcement officer appearing to be associated with the Pennsylvania Board of Pardons regarding a new early entry program of an incarcerated family member? Please be aware that this is a scam. The scammer will explain that this new program was created to make space in the prison system for the influx of violent inmates. The scammer will lead you to believe that your incarcerated family member qualified and was accepted into an ISPRP program. You'll be requested to advance payments for an ankle monitor required to be worn by your family member. Pennsylvanians should watch out for unsolicited phone calls requesting personal information, fear tactics such as urgent action needed, requests for payment via cash, prepaid debit cards, wire transfers, or gift cards. Tips to remember: never give out personal information over the phone, especially if you did not initiate the phone call. If the caller is asking for immediate payment by using services such as wiring money, purchasing gift cards, or other prepaid service, hang up. Legitimate agencies will never call and ask you to verify personal information. If you are unsure of the validity of the phone call, hang up and contact the agency, prison, to verify the phone call. And if you receive a voicemail, to call a specific phone number back. Do not call this number, as this is the scammer waiting for your return phone number. Consumers with questions that feel they have been victimized or have questions can contact the Attorney General's office at their website, or scams@attorneygeneral.gov, or calling the Attorney General's office at 800-441-2555. Now, I wanted to read that scam alert, first of all, because it's very important that people don't get confused about who is a legitimate company and who is not a legitimate company. Pennsylvania Pardon and Expungement Services, which is my company, also known as PA Pardon Services, and featuring the website recorderacer.net, We only respond to telephone calls or emails that we get from the website where you ask us to give you a call. And so we do not initiate any kind of phone calls, and we would never talk about financial information over the phone call. We also do not represent incarcerated individuals. And so if somebody is telling you that your family member is eligible for release on an ankle monitor, that's not a service we offer. It's nothing I know anything about. And I support the fact that this is a scam. One of the reasons it's important to distinguish that is because if people are searching for information about Pennsylvania pardons, my website shows up frequently very close to the Pennsylvania Board of Pardons because all of my content is about pardon and expungement services. The way my website works is people contact me, I direct them to the website, they fill out a form and give me first name, last name, date of birth, email, and phone number. And then I research the Pennsylvania Public UJS portal to look for their record. I tell them what can be cleared and when with emails from recorderacer.net. And then I've also initiated a procedure where I want to schedule a Zoom interview with everybody to actually review the record before I quote any fees or talk about any money, because I want to make sure that the individual knows that we're talking about the same record, gets their questions answered about pardons and expungements, and that there's no confusion. So be aware there is a scam going on related to the Board of Pardons. It has nothing to do with PA Pardon Services or recorderacer.net. In other news about the Board of Pardons, the online portal that they were creating in order to have people and companies be able to file pardon applications directly online seems to be temporarily off the plate, probably until the second quarter. I'm waiting for updates about that. However, the new Board of Pardons did get together and did sit down and have merit reviews on the first wave of applications coming through into 2023. That happened, I think, last week. And those cases, at least some of them, would be moving forward to the public presentations. Dates of those public presentations are on the website, recorderacer.net, as well as at the Board of Pardons. Those are the updates about the Board of Pardons for now. Wanted to continue talking about some of the weird glossary items that show up, glossary, dictionary words that show up that are peculiar to criminal justice that sometimes get discussed but may or may not be understood. And so we've already covered, and also I have a video about the common pleas research, the offense tracking number and the MDJ numbers and how they're assigned. Today I just wanted to cover a few terms that you might run into when you're looking at a record, and primarily related to dispositions. ARD is a disposition that stands for Accelerated Rehabilitative Disposition. It basically means probation without conviction. It's a diversionary program where if a person gets ARD, either for a first offense DUI or a marijuana case or anything else, it means the district attorney felt there was something about the case, probably a first offense, that this candidate should receive a disposition that allows them to receive probation and rehabilitative services without a conviction. Upon completion of ARD and the payment of fines and costs, there is no pardon that is needed because this is not a misdemeanor or a felony conviction. This is probation without conviction. It can be expunged in the county of conviction, and that's ARD. There's also a term called Nolle pros, Nolle pros, or prosse, or even Nolle prosequi, if you want the full-fledged version. They're the Latin word meaning not prosecuted. And what that means is that the case did not turn into a conviction because the Commonwealth decided, instead of pushing a conviction, that they would null pros the case or throw it out. Those cases can be expunged right away. Remember, I'm thinking about a docket as having numerous charges. If everything was null prossed, it can be expunged. If any of them turned into a conviction, that's going to need a pardon. But that is null pros that you'll see on dispositions of records. The next term to review is called Nolo Contendere. Nolo Contendere is Latin for meaning no contest. No contest means the defendant didn't want to say, I did it, but he was willing to say, I'm not going to mount a defense against the Commonwealth's prosecution. And without a defense being mounted to the prosecution, the conviction moves forward. So a nolo contendere is the same as a conviction. So nolo contendere means it's a misdemeanor or a felony conviction. It's just a different version, different verbiage of a guilty plea, and that needs a pardon if it's a misdemeanor or a felony. There's also a weird little variety of guilty plea. Now, this doesn't show up on the summary, the court summaries, but it'll show up sometimes on the docket sheets. It'll talk about an Alford plea. An Alford plea is another way of being found guilty, where you're basically saying very much the same as like a nolo contendere. You're saying, I believe the Commonwealth could convict me if they move forward. And so you can say you did it, but you're willing to move forward. It's the same as a conviction. If it's a misdemeanor or a felony, it needs a pardon. Peculiar little piece of dictionary item regarding numbers. If you see a reference to a 586 disposition, 586 disposition means that it was probably a conviction for some kind of financial crime, and that the victim was paid back, might have been bad checks, might have been some kind of financial theft. And when the victim is paid back, they agree that the case does not need to move forward. And so a 586 disposition is frequently expungible. You'd need to get into the details of the record a little bit, but if you see 586 disposition, it is not necessarily a conviction of a misdemeanor or a felony. And likewise, last but not least, a Section 117 disposition, or occasionally a Section 119. These are specific subsections under the Drug, Device, and Cosmetic Act that allow a first-time offender that was caught with marijuana usually to basically receive 30 days probation, after which time the charges are either dismissed or dismissible, which means that usually something notating a Section 117 disposition can be expunged and does not require a pardon. So that's Section 117. Finally, not related to dispositions, this just in, guilty plea colloquy was mentioned earlier during the interview. Colloquy is basically a phrase that means a conversation, and it's just confusing because most people never heard it before, and then they're standing there in front of a judge in a very tense, embarrassing situation, and the judge wants to review the colloquy with them. So the first thing a guy facing a judge does is hear that he's going to go over this form that his attorney zipped through with him, making sure he understands his rights, and that's called a colloquy. It's to make sure the defendant understands their constitutional rights so that when they're ready to move forward with a guilty plea and accept their punishment, the court can feel comfortable that the attorney has spent time with them explaining the rights, then the judge reviews their rights, and then you're ready to move forward to conviction and sentencing. And so that will conclude our glossary and dictionary review of terms in the criminal justice system for today, March 13th, 2023. All right, this is the extra topics portion, or the topics portion of today's podcast. Here's what you need to do before your record can be expunged. which when I hear that, what I hear is, this is what you'll need to know before you know if your record can be expunged. Because expungements are different than pardons. The expungements actually clear the records, but you don't know if you need a pardon first. So the first thing you need to do is have your Pennsylvania criminal record so that you know what you were convicted of and what you weren't convicted of. Then you can be told what can be expunged, which is a 2 to 5 month thing, pretty quick, and what needs to be pardoned, which is about a 2-year process, covered other places throughout my content. There was also a question raised about what happens during the background investigation conducted by the Board of Pardons. So, in a large sense, I only know what I know anecdotally from having people tell me what they disclose to the investigator when they get a phone call from the investigator. So one answer is when the client receives a phone call from the investigator, they usually want to go over certain details such as where they're living, have they had any contact with the police, can they verify the facts in the pardon application, can they give them some updated information about their employment and their situation and things of that sort. So that's sort of the client phone call interview part of the investigation that happens before the board does a merit review. I also believe the question is asking, what does the Board of Pardons do when they start a background investigation? And I know that they work with their own investigative staff, and I believe that they have access to all probation and parole records about how somebody did when they were on probation and whether they completed counseling. Also, if they were incarcerated, how they did with their parole officer, how they did after their release on the street, whether there were any PVs or parole violations or not that made them go back into court. I believe they have access to those records, as well as, of course, all the criminal complaints and affidavits, and I believe they also have access to records about recent police contact, which is all available to the Commonwealth. And I believe that's what the board does as they begin and continue with their background investigation. I'm going to also answer, will I automatically get a hearing before the Board of Pardons? Nothing is automatic. To get a hearing in front of the Board of Pardons, you first need to pass the merit review, where you need 2 out of 5 votes. That gets you to do a public presentation in front of the board. After you present in front of the board, you're looking for 3 out of the 5 votes. And if you get the 3 out of the 5 votes, then it's recommended to the governor that he give you a pardon. The governor is basically the 4th out of 6 votes. And if the governor issues your pardon, then you need an expungement. If the governor doesn't issue you a pardon, or at any point along the way you're denied, the rules say that you must wait a year and then you can ask again. Can the governor overrule the Board of Pardons? You bet. The governor is the ultimate authority and executive authority in Pennsylvania. Only pardons can issue from him. He uses the Board of Pardons and his investigative powers to vet the pardon application so that he and the board can feel comfortable that when they recommend somebody to have their record cleared and be officially forgiven, that that candidate is going to go forth and commit no additional crimes and become a benefit to society.